Hey everyone, I'm Dana Oliver, beauty director at Yahoo Lifestyle, and I'm excited to be speaking with the brilliant and beautiful star of Grownish, Yara Shahidi. How excited are you guys? We're gonna have a great time, lots of conversation, and just chill. So we have a little clip to show you guys. Can we roll that?
6 heels, bad wheels. Somebody call a doctor, cause of the ill. Yeah, there she is. Boy, you look foul. We call that keep 9
Hello? What just happened? Huh. Well, guess this is a sign from God.
Hey, somebody turn on their camera light.
Oh, good idea. Oh, sorry.
Oh. Damn, you put your pajamas back on quick.
Woo!
Yes. Hi, Yara, how are you?
I am good. How are you?
Amazing in orange.
Thank you.
Thank you for bringing some brightness to the chilly New York.
Thank you. It's my favorite color adjacent. My favorite color is yellow, so it's like right next to it. Same family.
I love it. And the shoes.
Oh, yeah.
We'll have to talk later. I may have to see what size you wear. So, Grownish, I feel like we've seen you, blossom into a young woman from Blackish to Grownish. Can you talk about that journey between the two shows?
Yeah, well, the journey was a quick one. It depends on how you look at it. If you think of the journey from when Blackish started, it was a nice long journey. If you think of it from the summer between season 3 of Blackish and season 1 of Grownish, it went by like the speed of light. Blackish has been amazing just because it was really my entree into the TV world. I'd been guest star on a show, I'd been a series regular on a show before, but to be on a show that had such a big platform like Blackish, that has such a big platform like Blackish, and to be on a show that really has dedicated itself to being socially aware and has dedicated itself to being relevant, not for the sake of being relevant, but because that's the storytelling that we desire to see, was really important, and I think really set precedent for what projects I wanted to be a part of afterwards. And so Grownish happened, Kenya Barris called me with the idea January 3rd, which is actually the day, so Grownish premiered exactly a year after when he called me with the idea, which was crazy. But January 3rd, he had called. He had already talked to my parents a week ago, like a week beforehand, with the idea. And he had called me. I just finished my own college applications, and he was like, so what do you think about Zoey going to college? And I was like, what do you mean, what do I think? I mean, I thought I was just gonna disappear from Blackish, and like that was just gonna be the end of Zoey. Like she was gonna go to college and we just kind of never see her again, and she pops up now and then with Rick Fox, but like I didn't really imagine like anything else happening. And so I think the process before I signed on to the show was really only a span of a couple of weeks. I went from 16 to 17, and what really sold me on the idea was having the creative meeting with Kenya. Because before I had a brief conversation with Kenya, and then it was all lawyers talking. But when I was able to sit down and talk to Kenya and talk to Larry Wilmore about their vision with the show, it really sold me because they were trying to do something special. And of course, I think Zoey would have naturally evolved on Blackish had her character just stayed on Blackish and nothing else. But it was an amazing opportunity to tell her story through her own lens, because ultimately Blackish is through Dre's lens. And so everything that happens is with the purpose of Dre learning something. And so even though there is amazing character development for each character on the show, we had a different opportunity and other stories that we could tell when it's Zoey. And so yeah, then the process between season 3 of Blackish and season 1 of Grownish was really fun because Kenya treated me as a collaborator. I was in the room when all of my castmates auditioned and we read together, and I was talking to the writers, and so it was an amazing process because he did want to hear from me, and it was a funny moment of trying to figure out how Yara would feel about something and then figuring out how would Zoey feel about something.
Right, and I love that collaboration, and there's so many similarities between your personal life, applying for college, getting into college. Congratulations on getting into Harvard, you guys. That's a big deal. What were the conversations like with Kenya, as far as like tailoring Zoey's path into college with Grownish?
Well, quite honestly, Kenya has treated his work as a form of art imitating life, and so his own daughter, he has a clan of children. He has 6 children, and he has 3 daughters. One daughter who I know because we went to school together, and she was going to college too. And so really it was him looking around him, like he was looking around in his world, seeing his own daughter go to college, seeing me getting ready, seeing even Marcus getting ready to go to school, and really trying to figure out what was the natural next step where we wouldn't prohibit growth. How would we do it where it seemed right? And so it was a collaborative moment. Of course, Zoey does, I don't know how many things that Yara would never consider doing. But it was intentional too, because I think in doing this next show and in growing up with this character, there's a certain realization that it wouldn't be as much fun if it was Yara. Half these storylines would not exist if it was Yara. But it's still true to the college experience. There were so many things where I would call my friends like, is this real? Like, does this actually happen? My friends who are already East Coast in college, and they're like, yep, that is real, that is true. And I was so surprised. I mean, even the storyline with Adderall that happens within the 2nd episode, I had no clue about that. And it was really, one, the writers are so close to their own college experience. We have a pretty young writer's room, but also they were hearing from other college students, and they were really trying to figure out what storylines would be relevant, would be pertinent, without really trying to make it seem like an Aesop's fable with like, the moral of the story is, don't do this. And that's really what Zoey represents. None of these episodes have a clean ending. If anything, it feels like a cliffhanger, but it means that we try and have the opportunity to really watch Zoey grow and progress. And I'm really excited for season 2 because we'll have more episodes to explore. This season, we get through a year of college in 13 episodes, which means there's a lot to cover and a lot to handle. And so that's why in the beginning of every episode, you hear my VO, which is like, basically, this is what's happened in the past, like, 10 weeks you've been gone. And so I'm really excited to be able to expand upon everything that we've touched upon in season 1 and really have more of a chance to play with those storylines. We did this so quickly.
Right, but I love, some of the topics, and they're very unfiltered, as you say, with sexuality, bisexuality, drugs, the Adderall, I was like, oh my God, like they're popping pills, like what is going on? Alcohol, even when it comes to consumerism, like I was watching Grownish and I was like, wait a minute, I grew up with a different world, and, my, first day outfit was not on the level of Zoey's first day outfit. It was just on a whole different level. So, have you ever doubted or questioned tapping into these, unfiltered topics?
It was. I'd be lying if I didn't say it was a scary transition, and it was one that required much discussion, because the thing that we wanted to ensure was that nothing that we did was gratuitous, like for shock value, and for the sake of just being edgy, and that everything had a greater purpose. And so there are even storylines that the audience has seen that will come back around end of season. And so it was really nice to be able to talk to the writers, and they really heard me. Kenya heard me, the showrunner Julie Bean, who's amazing, heard me when I was voicing my concerns, because I also have the predicament of being a character who's a year older than me. Most people, it's reverse. Most people, you have older people playing teenagers, versus I'm still figuring it out as a teenager. And there's so many things where I have no base reality for this experience. So I'm not pulling from like, oh yes, when I went through a breakup. Like, no, it's never happened. So, I was like, asking friends. Even that one clip, they were like, remember, it's vodka. And I was like, that means nothing to me. And so they're like, no, so it's like, I was like, still don't get it. And so it took 5 minutes of like people explaining what vodka tastes like, and like me pretending water is vodka. It's a whole experience. So there's a lot of learning on set. And with all that being said, I'm really happy that if I have to do any growing up, it's on a set where they care about my well-being and they hear me when I voice these concerns. They hear my family, and they really know that it is a family affair, and everyone on set, everyone from production to writer's room to crew really became family, because we understand that this is a pretty scary adventure for everybody.
Oh, yeah. And what were some of those, events or topics where you're like, I don't think I would necessarily do this in real life? But
okay.
Go ahead, Zoey, you got it.
You know what it is? So because we did 4-day episodes, Blackish shoots an episode within 5 days. We did 4-day episodes, which means by day 8, I was shooting the episode 2, and reading episode 3, which meant my character was on Adderall and then dates 2 guys in one episode, then finds the 3rd guy, right? And so a lot was happening. And that was the first time where I was like, okay, pause, what's happening? And that's when we had a conversation, our first initial conversation, just about like, what is the greater storyline? What's the story we're supposed to tell? That is when I turned to my friends like, okay, does this happen? And it was so surprising to see that college really does happen in dog years. Like, you've experienced an entire lifetime by the time you go to bed. And so it was interesting then figuring out just how to tailor the episode, and both directors of those episodes were great, and trying to give context to why Zoey's doing what she's doing, because she is a smart human. And so even though she isn't Yara, and even though she doesn't make theoretically the wisest choices, she's, like, what we've seen of her, she's smart. And so why would she fall for 2 guys? Why would she be taking Adderall? What is the setup that would make this make sense?
Right, and another facet of the show that I really, really love is how diverse the cast is. Can you speak to why, especially today, it's so important to have those different perspectives?
Yeah, well, I mean, first and foremost, I have to start by saying Grownish isn't perfect. It's still a microcosm that we are representing, but in terms of the people that we do have on the show, it was interesting. A lot of the characters were tailor-made to who was in them. Luca, who plays Luca, met Kenya Barris at the Soho House, and that's how that came to be. Chloe and Hallie, I remember he heard us. I was presenting an award, and they were accepting on behalf of Beyonce, just as they do. And I remember apparently the mic didn't turn off, and I was like, oh my gosh, those are my friends. And so Kenya heard me, and was like, okay, we have to capture that on the show. But in terms of what we were trying to do, it's similar to Blackish in that everybody has a very different point of view. And so entering the college campus, we had a chance to give even more variety in terms of ideology and core beliefs, because we're no longer a part of the same family. We were no longer raised the same way. And so with that came the task of trying to figure out what would our storylines be, what would our growing up be like, so that when we approach these topics, everyone had a natural and different response. And what was even more interesting to establish was how everybody has their own bias. And that's really explored throughout the seasons, and that's even going to be explored in the next 2 or 3 episodes, I think, depending on where we're at. Yeah. And so exploring really a natural way to figure out who has their own bias and how it's informed by who they are. You even see that episode, there's a moment in which Nomi, who's bisexual, is talking to Aaron, and he's not really understanding bisexuality. He's not really getting it, which is really funny because he is the activist on campus, and he is the outspoken person, and we're not using that moment to invalidate his opinions, but to say that there's still so much more that he has to learn. And then there's Nomi on the other end being like, embrace me as a bi woman, but you see the bias she has towards Dave, who's also bisexual. And then you even have Zoey growing up, and there are little moments throughout the show in which you realize, like, oh, she hasn't quite figured it out yet.
Well, I think it's so great to have these different perspectives, because I know for me personally, when I went into college, it was so easy and natural for me to gravitate towards the people that looked just like me or had the same perspectives as me, But I love that with Zoey, she has all these different friends from different backgrounds. And, why do you think it's so important to show that?
Well, I mean, it really goes to what I was saying before, in that it is hard to really have an informed conversation if you're hearing one perspective. And it's hard to have, when you're hearing these topics that we're discussing, it's hard to really dig deep into what we're trying to discuss in the episode if everyone agrees. And so a lot of the conflict, or even a lot of the conversation that's happening, is about friends disagreeing. And that's why even in the first episode, they strategically did that kind of Breakfast Club moment of finding a way in which such different people would naturally be together. And then even with the introduction of my roommate, Anna, that's another moment where it's like, okay, so we know each other because we're roommates, because she wouldn't naturally be a part of the group who forgot to register for classes. And so now you have people who are on the opposite end of the political spectrum. We have people that have different lifestyles. And so it was important to show that, and it was important to everyone to really figure out how we can dig deep into each character.
Yeah. So I have to ask you, you were in the writer's room when, everyone was, trying out for these roles, but in real life, if you could pick your own roommate, celebrity or just anyone, I'm gonna say celebrity. If you could pick your own roommate, who would you pick?
Oh, goodness. So what Grownish has taught me is that I most likely will have to live in a single. And with that being said, in this hypothetical world in which I can room with anybody, I'm gonna sound, oh my goodness, I am not 17 turning 18, I am an old human. I would choose James Baldwin, just because I feel like it would be really useful when writing essays to be able to turn over to him and be like, so can you give me a quote to work with? Because I feel like that's what I do anyway. But also, I mean, personally, James Baldwin is one of my idols, and my room is just kind of like dedicated to him. I have a James Baldwin pillow, signed copy of Go Tell It on the Mountain. I have a James Baldwin candle, James Baldwin t-shirts. It's serious.
All right, and so, your professor is literally lit in the show.
Dion?
Yes, Dion is something else. But, if you could pick someone else who could teach you literally anything and who would that person be? Who would you sign up for on the spot? I have to have this professor, I have to take this class. And what class would they be teaching?
Okay, well, I'll just pull from real life. I mean, part of the reason I decided to commit to Harvard is because Professor Gates will be there. Professor Henry Louis Gates Jr. will be there teaching African American studies. And so, yeah, that would be it.
All right. So to go back a little bit to what I was saying about, my generation, we grew up on a different world. I'm pretty sure you've heard the comparisons between your character and Lisa Bonet. How does that make you feel?
It's really cool. I mean, in approaching Grownish, there are, of course, natural comparisons because of what Blackish is like and because of what we're trying to do with Grownish. And it's an honor to be compared to a different world. And I think really in discussing with Kenya, he was saying a different world is part of the reason why he decided to go to college. Having that kind of representation and seeing that that was a possibility is the reason he felt so motivated. And so to be able to do something similar with Grownish was amazing. And a part of paying homage to something, I believe, is really not trying to replace or replicate it. Because a different world is amazing, and I think with everything that it did, it was perfect timing, perfect storylines, perfect cast, and so there's no reason to touch that. If anything, we're really trying to use the space that it gave us as a show about Black kids in college to then be able to play in these new storylines. If it weren't for a different world, I don't think the precedent would have been set to say that there's an audience for this show, like Grownish, that there's interest, and that it can be done. So if anything, we pay homage by saying thank you for letting us do all this stuff on TV.
Yes, give it up for that. Now, I got a few questions from our Yahoo Lifestyle Twitter tribe, and I have to ask you, because you juggle a lot of hats, and one of those is being an activist, and I know you are passionate with 18 for 18, over 18 for 18.
18 by 18.
18
yep.
by 18, sorry. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? And one of our followers wanted to know, how do you manage, being an actress, a student, and an activist?
Okay, well, 18 by 18 is an initiative that in the short term is focused on midterms and youth engagement in midterms, because even though we have quite a few years until the next presidential election, midterms is one of our opportunities to really gain control of the House, the Senate, all of that, of our local governments. And so it's important that we're armed with the information that we need so that we can engage. And so the goal is, even though I am really out loud and progressive, to have a nonpartisan platform in which you can understand the issues that are on the table right now. And if you feel like those issues don't affect you, well, we can at least provide a story with who it affects, or we can at least tell you how it does affect you. And so it's about going to those areas. Like the example that I use is St. Cloud, Minnesota. I'm from Minneapolis, but in St. Cloud, it was one of the first areas that proposed an immigrant ban of Somali immigrants. And right now they have their first Somali representative. And so it's, how did we get there? What are the stories that need to be told so that we can realize that immigration is not something that this immigration ban isn't something that Trump just came up with, but there's a culture in our country, really, that is anti-immigrant. And so how do we tell these stories of immigrants? How do we tell these stories of people who need access to Planned Parenthood, of people who are dependent on these certain policies. And I think policies are talked about so theoretically in the news about how it'll benefit me or how it won't benefit me, that we aren't thinking globally. We need to be thinking globally as voters. It isn't just about us. And I think when we invest in our community, good, bad, or indifferent, the community will invest in us. And so that's why it's important. And of course, as somebody who is turning 18 on Saturday, I thought it was important to really engage all my peers who are turning 18 or who this will be their first election. The news is so confusing, and so to take it out of Fox News versus CNN and really put it behind, these are factual stories, and these are facts, and these are people you can support, and this is, even if you're under 18, this is how you can engage, because it's not just about turning 18 and then all of a sudden figuring out how to engage in a government that you know nothing about.
Right. Yeah, so where do you get your news from? How do you
Oh my goodness.
like stay out of the fake news?
Oh, I am a news junkie. I probably single-handedly support NPR because I don't know. All of my favorite podcasts are on NPR, and so I'm always listening to podcasts. Like Code Switch is one of them, The Nod, Pod Save America, and so I try and keep a wide range in terms of what I listen to and get multiple perspectives on it, especially if I can hear people of color talking. That's always great because I think that informs what we hear. And then also, I mean, I do have to say, I do have CNN, and then I do have Democracy Now!, and then I do have BBC, and they all give me notifications, and so that means I have like 20 million notifications by the end of the day about something that's happened in the world.
And I thought my life was crazy. But you seem to manage it all pretty well. I'm gonna kick it over to some audience Q&A right now.
Is it hot in here? It's not just me.
Hi, my name is Maya, and I'm happy. I'm really thankful to be here, and I'm also thankful that you're here. I just have a question for you. I've watched you since Imagine That, Blackish and Grownish.
Thank you.
Do you have any advice for young actors?
Well, I come from a family of creative people, and I think just watching them and looking at my own journey, what has been evident is that we've really only invested in projects that we believe in. And so I know when you're just entering the business, opportunity isn't always surrounding us, but what is obvious and what we've heard from casting directors is that they can tell when you walk into a room and feel attached to the material and believe in the material. And oftentimes, two misconceptions is that you're in competition with people versus some of my best friends are people that I've met like sitting in the lobby of an audition. And two, they always tell you like you just gotta take everything. And while I think practice of course makes perfect, there is something to be said for feeling as though you're connected or believing in the material so that, let's say you do go ahead on a project, you feel proud of it when you look back on it, but even if it's just the audition experience, you feel as though you've actually learned something. Yeah. That's what I'd have to say.
Another question?
Hi, my name is Nettie.
Hi.
Hi. So I know that you're transitioning from high school to college right now. Yeah, girl, I feel. Are you nervous that Harvard isn't going to live up to like the fictional college on the show?
Oh, I hope not. I hope it doesn't, honestly. Like, you could give me half the drama and I'd be cool. I really, like, Grownish opened my eyes to so many things. I legit thought I'd be going to class and then, like, filling out my homework and writing essays and then going to bed and making a couple, like, lifelong friends on the way. I didn't realize there was a whole other component to it that Grownish made me aware of. And so, I'm really excited for whatever Harvard has to offer. And if anything, I'm dealing with the pressure, self-imposed pressure of hoping that I live up to Harvard. And I realized, I was actually just talking to my friend who's in college right now, just talking about like high school so many times tells you to associate your worth with your GPA or quantitative values. And I mean, you could say this about more than just high school, but really the world around us. And even if it's not something our family has told us to do, it's just one of those subconscious moments in which it's so hard when you're amidst figuring out who you are to describe who you are. So we attribute our worth to anything quantitative, anything solid, anything that is supposedly objective. And so I'm in the process of letting that go because of course I want to do well in my courses, but I realize like my emotional well-being can't be tied to a grade. So, yeah.
That's good advice. Got one more question?
Hey,
Hey, how are you?
I'm doing good.
We're Instagram friends that we've met in real life.
It's great to see you again, as always. I'm really proud of all the accomplishments and everything you've done. I can't wait to see what else you do, especially with college.
Thank
and
you.
I was just overall wondering, because you made another big step in your life with directing, actually.
Yes.
And I'm really excited for your project. I'm really excited to see it with Refinery 29. And I was wondering, as just stepping into director's shoes from being primarily an actress for most of your life, how was it in creating a dialogue and communication with being a director versus an actress and how you tell stories?
It was so much fun, first and foremost, and it was a challenge. I was surrounded by great people. My mama, who's right there, was the EP of it, and my bubba, who's a cinematographer, was the DP, the director of photography, and so I had great people guiding me on the way, for sure. And it was new and different. Of course, being on something like Grownish and Blackish, we're used to collaboration. Kenya and the directors and the writers have always turned to us as a cast to help make informed decisions, to help bring life to the character, but it's a different role when, because I conceptualized the piece too and co-wrote it, it was a different role to be the creator/director of it and to really have a more of a semblance of ownership of what's being done. And directing is, I think, it is a lot of compromises, and at the same time, it's how do you maintain your vision and the integrity of your vision amidst all of this. And it was even interesting realizing the barriers I'd put on myself in terms of communication and in terms of expectation to be taken seriously. Being in a space in which I seemingly didn't know as much as I do in all these other areas of my life, it was nerve-wracking because I was like, I don't know what size shot it is. All I know is I want it this way, like this. And so I realized, like, one, to not feel as though my lack of qualifications meant I was undeserved of this opportunity, which was something that I had to work on more than the people around me because they were all really willing to listen to what I had to say. And then also really figuring out how I wanted to tell this story, because it is the crux of it. It's called X, and it's about this young person traveling through Los Angeles and really how their environment affects who they are. And so even though there's, of course, like the climax of the short, there's something about it that is overarchingly casual because it's supposed to talk about just the really, I don't know how to word it other than the daily trauma of life. And so in creating it, it begged the question of becoming really specific in a way I never had to, and being really specific about all the details and having a meaning behind every detail. And it was fun because I realized, like, I'm that person. The reason I know I was supposed to be in this creative space is because when I dream, it's not through my point of view. It's always through other people's point of views. Like, I'll hop POVs, and I'll be like, now it's a wide shot as I'm watching X, Y, and Z happen. Or, like, even if I die in a dream, the dream continues. I just, like, become an omniscient perspective. And so it was cool because I really got to play in a new creative space, and I got to have fun with something that I had ownership of and have support. I wrote that there was a bus in the script, and then boom, they got a bus. Like, we shot on Fairfax. That was trippy to me because, like, I was like, how did you even get a permit for this? Yes, I know I wrote it, but I wasn't expecting it to happen. And so I say all that to say it was a lot of fun, and I can't wait to the next project. I feel like this informed how I want to direct. This informed really the attitude I want to have going into these other projects.
Nice. Well, before I wrap it up, I have one awesome Twitter question I have to ask you.
Okay.
Someone says, has Charlie lost his seat at the conference room table? #Naptown playa.
There's something about Charlie. I think he is the cornerstone of The Office in many ways. And so I don't know if he will ever lose his seat at the table. And I mean, when you really think about Charlie's character, it is so outrageous. And when you see, like, when you read the lines, I wish you guys could read the scripts, because when you read the scripts, it's like, how in the world is he gonna pull this off as an actor to make this seem believable? But Dion is the most hilarious person, and so there is no getting rid of Charlie Telfie, because I think it's what brings The Office together. He's that middleman between the extremely conservative and off-putting boss and, like, everybody else and Dre in The Office.
Well, thank you so much, Yara. Let's give Yara a hand. Thank you for much.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for being here.
And can you just remind everyone who doesn't know when and where they can catch Grownish?
Okay, so Grownish is on Wednesday nights at 8, pretty much 8 across the board. And if you are West Coast for any reason like me, then it is 5 or 8 o'clock, depending on your service provider. On Freeform, which was ABC Family, I just want to clarify. And you can always catch it on Hulu and on the Freeform app. And all of that really helps us if you do that.
Awesome.
Thank
Thanks
you.
again, Yara.
Thank you, thank you.